Okay, here we go. I think I'm gonna go. I know I had kind of moved down into this area, but I realized, you know what? I need to get these areas up here done. So I'm gonna wet it. In fact, I'm gonna just cross right over onto that top area. It's just gonna help smooth it out. And I am going to add a little bit of this purple. In fact, okay. So now I've got that wet. Let's turn it to the side. It's all nice and glossy. So let's go ahead and add some of this gray. I'm going to check it. I checked it earlier, so I'm going to check it again. And I think that looks pretty good. I don't want to go too dark too fast. So I'm going to do a light wash of this. And it's still looking a little on the reddish side. So I'm going to take a little bit of this yellow and I'm going to mix it over here. And I'm going to try to get it a little bit grayer. And then we'll see how that looks. Okay, let's go ahead and let that area dry. And where else? Might as well, while I'm going here, I think I'm going to do the same thing to this area. Okay, this time I have a nice dividing line, just right along this edge here, where this that fold comes up. Okay, now it's gray, but then it comes down into a purple. So I'm going to put that brush down. And I'm picking up my number 2. I love that dusky purple. And then as it comes down into this area, let's move on over into the red, and we'll make like a really pretty violet. I'm just blending it right out. In fact, let's go ahead and just wet the rest of this. Okay, kind of came down into the stem a little bit. So we're going to take some of this violet. I think on these bigger petals, it's just easier to just get as much of the back values as we can, then go back and do the details. I just have to watch. Make sure I keep the water off of that area. Okay, I'm going to pull this out a little bit and pick up some red and then there's a lot going on in here, so I don't want to get too far into that stem area. Okay, now we're going to go, I'm going to tint it and make sure it's a little bit more on the blue-violet side. I'm going to move to a bigger brush. Okay, now we're coming back in here, back into purples. I'm not going to worry too much about the edge of the beards, because we'll be able to fix those with the Dremel tool. Okay, now I'm going to come back over here, and it's just easier when you have just certain colors to put in, that you just do it on the dry paper. You just have to be really quick, and you kind of have to wait till you've got a couple of layers on the paper. That one's a little hard to get around. Probably going to have to clean that edge up a bit. Okay, we're building more form and shape. I don't know why. I'm going to leave that. There's a little dot there. I'm going to let this dry and then come back and do it again. So I'm just going to let that dry. And, okay. I'm gonna have to go with two different brushes. I'm gonna start off with a little bit of yellow. And then red. And then a little bit of water. And then we're going right into gray. I went right over that front. Okay, and then it's going to be very purplish up there where that beard is coming down. I think I'm going to add just a little bit more yellow to this gray right here so we can tone it down a little bit. And we'll see how that looks. And in the meantime, I will have to fix I've got spots on my background. Okay, back to a little bit of bluer grays. And right around that little guy. Okay, every single time we do this, we build a little bit more value. Okay, I'm just going to softly blend that out because I've got another area where these kind of move around. Okay, so now we can let it dry. I think I'm going to let the whole thing dry and then come back up here, and we're just going to keep layering in the darkest values. Okay, so I've turned it back around so I can come back over here and try to get this little area finished. Trying to go over that one little tiny fold there. So now I'm just going to start picking from my dry areas. Let's see, now right here, it's kind of dark because it's folding. This whole little thing is kind of folding over. Then I'm going to try to make sure I don't lose the little folds there. Okay, need a little bit, needs to be darker. Now water. So then I'm going to keep switching back and forth when I see an area that has a little bit more color. Then I'll add whatever I think it needs. I'm just going to start pulling that color out, and I'm going to try to get some texture into there. And again, I think I went a little bit too dark. I need to pull out a little bit for some highlight. There we go. That's better. And then it's a little bit lighter on this side. Not gonna lie, the little ruffles on the side, those can be a little bit harder to put in. Fact, I'm actually going to go to my 5/0 so I can get the little pattern of those little lines in there. There we go. And then I notice as I come up, it's a little bit, it's kind of leans a little blue, like a light blue violet. Let's see. I think I'm going to be happier with my blue, or my my blue, with my 2-aught. Okay. More gray. Okay. I got to get back into the flow here. All right, let's see. What am I doing? I need some of the dark value because we need to do this little area under here. A little bit of water. And a little bit of this darker value, darker unsaturated value. Okay, that's good. And a little bit of red. And some water right in the center. Now I'm going to take a little bit of this gray. I think I need some more yellow in here. I want to make sure I leave that little highlight because it's folding again. And some blue. Let's grab some blue here. And back to my 2-aught. So I think I have a lot of pretty good, dark, interesting values, all different kind of colors. Okay, now what happens here, I have to build this little edge, and then it comes down, and back to my 5-aught. Okay, now I've kind of established the basic structure. And I'm going to come right over that and tone this down a little bit. Okay, there, that's better. And it needs some blue. Okay, now I gotta get some red and a little bit more red there. more blue. Needs to be darker. Right along this edge. So remember what I was mentioning earlier about when you don't have much color to work with. Now, one thing that's going to help these purples and these grays stand out is when we get the green and the yellow in the stem and in parts of the buds. I'm just making that little edge there. Okay, I'm going to switch back to my double lot. Now I'm just going to dry brush in a couple of little lines, and then back to some violet. I'm going to soften these just a bit. I don't know what it is, but that first stage of trying to get that color in so that you can build on top of it, sometimes it can be a little nerve-wracking because I don't want to go too dark at first. So it almost feels like you're having to really figure out where you're at. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, okay, now these values are going to start coming together. See, then you can start adding darker areas. And now you're starting to build form. So it's kind of like this area. And a little bit more gray. Anyhow, that happens every time I start a new area. See, like I think I'm probably just going to be better off. I'm going to kind of wash over this. I'm going to be better off just taking my little scrubber brush and just pulling out some of those highlights. It takes time. It's like right there, I came in way too far. So I'm going to use this, my Rosemary Company. Now, sometimes it doesn't do very well trying to pull out some of those colors. So I think I'm going to try my modified soft scrubber here. We'll see how that works. That's a little better. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing here. That's just so much easier to do it that way. And one thing that helps is you've got to kind of follow the ruffles. So I'm going to take my 5/0. Let's try this for a second. Okay, I'm going to dip in just a bit, and that helps form the edge of the ruffle. There, that's a little bit better. It's shaped better. All it takes is just like one little area. See, even right there, just needed a little bit of a fold. There we go. I just had to get back into the swing of it. Okay, see there now. Lightly pull some of that background color. Oh, that looks so much better. See, now I'm going to steal from that area, pull it down, and go right into the gray. I'm going to stay with my 5/0 here. Okay, same here. Let's get a little bit more. There, now it looks ruffled. I was really struggling with that. It's all in the details. A little bit more. And a little bit more. So what I wasn't doing is pulling some of the background in. See, now I just pulled a little bit more. So now it looks nice and wrinkly. And now, right in this area, it has to look a little bit darker. And right on the other side, I need a little bit more of that red. Okay, that fixed that edge. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a little bit of yellow right along that edge, just pulling just a little bit of yellow down into there. And that just gives it a little bit more depth. And now let's go back to, what was I using? My double lot. Same thing, some yellow here. I'm going to add it right around this area. A little bit of yellow there. All right, looks pretty good. Okay, I'm going to put that down. Get that a little bit darker. A little bit more red and blue. And it's still not quite dark enough. Now it is. So I needed to make sure that those dark areas had some color change within the value. And pick up just a little bit of yellow, put it in there, and that will help darken it. And a little bit more color in here. So I have all these nice little areas going on in there. Well, I think I'm going to use my 2-aught. I will use this gray area right here. Okay, now we've got some value change. Now I can go back down to this little area here. And then a little bit of this dark color there. And gray. Now let's soften it. And I found another place for yellow. That'll help with those grays. A little bit more blue violet. Just a little bit more. And dark value right along this edge. There's a little bit of color in there that I kind of skipped around, which it's not going to matter much, I guess. I can always go back. Yeah, that's what it needed. Just some whites within. Let's soften that. There. Okay. A little bit more. that blue violet. Okay, I think I finally got it the right value. Maybe just a little bit more. And drop in a little bit of yellow. A little bit of dark there, and needs to be really dark. Not really dark, but I'll put in just a little tiny bit of color so it doesn't get flat. But there. That's a pretty fold there. I just think it's so important to get those right on the little details. Okay. And then right in here. All right, so far so good. Okay, so I can leave that, and so now I'm going to let it dry. So here's what I've done so far. I kind of stopped because, well, most people know I have really bad vision. Up close, I'm fine. Far away, I'm not. So unless I'm like 2 inches away from the paper, you're never going to see what I'm painting because my head's going to be in the way. So I just went around and figured out where all the important lines are. And all I did was just take a little bit of color, and I just went very carefully around the outer edge. And I did the same up here. I found where that edge was at right there, and I went ahead and, this is such a tiny piece, I just went ahead and added a little bit of color. And then right here, I kind of redefined where all these little areas were, and I did the same right here. And that took a while. It probably took me almost an hour just to find where all my edges were. And because I know I'm going to be coming down into this area, because this is another dark spot, I went ahead and cleaned up the lines and figured out where I'm at. Okay, so now that I've done that, I was looking at this top part, and hopefully you're looking at your image too, and I've realized this has to be a little darker. So taking my shadow color and other than the highlight, I'm going to go around and just add right on top, so making it a little bit darker, just right on the dry paper. Adding a little bit more water. And then just softening that little edge right there. And then that area, that definitely needs to be a little bit deeper. It's always good when you walk away from something for a while and you come back and you look. I just really recommend that. In fact, now that I have a little bit of a light color, I'm just going back over those little edges, making them just a little bit darker. So you can still see the value change, but it just, even the little highlights needed to be darker. smooth that out. And that looks better. Okay, so I think I'm gonna start right here and I'm gonna enlarge. Okay, so I think, how am I gonna do this? Let me think here for a sec. Okay, I'm running out of these grays, so let's just turn this whole area right here into the gray. Now that's not gonna be dark enough, so I'll keep adding a little bit more color as I need it. I'm just going right on the dry paper. Okay, now I'm going to take some water, going right along the edge there, and then blending them together. Okay, let's get some of this color. Our monsoons are gone, and now it's really hot. So now the air has dried up again. Okay, so right in this area, a little bit of purple and a little bit of blue. Or a little bit of red and a little bit of blue. Okay, now back to the magenta, and I'm going to wick my brush. There's a little tiny edge, a highlight right there. Now I'm starting to get into, let's get some red over here and pull some blue. Now we have just a tiny bit of red and blue and red violet and blue violet. I might have to switch brushes too. Up here is really, really red violet in that area. In fact, almost all the way down the side. And again, it's better if you struggle with your darks getting too black, then start out with the colors, then go ahead and you can either add just a little bit, float a little bit of yellow on top, or mix yourself up some darker value and then just put it right on the top. So now I'm just going to blend these out just a little bit. I'm going to put that down and go to my 0. And again, for anybody watching, just know that this is not going to be, it's not going to be quick. Let's get a little bit more blue over here. I'm going to grab some more of that gray and so I'm just going to drop in just a little tiny bit color up towards the top, and then I'm going to let it dry. And then we'll go back and we'll smooth things out and add some darker values. And that's coming down, and it's kind of more of a red violet, especially right here. That's just smoothed out. Okay, so now let's leave that alone until that gets dry, because I don't want to. I just after I just said that, I'm going to add a little bit more. I'm just going to drop water on this. Okay, I'm just going to smooth that out. Oh, that should have been light there. Okay, so I'll have to fix that. Actually, I probably should dry it. Okay, now I'm going to come over into this area and just work my way down. And I've noticed that this, let's see, let's get a little bit of the blue in there. I'm just fixing that edge a little bit. Okay, so now what I need to do is, let's see, how do I want to do this part? Okay, I'm going to take some of the magenta, some of the blue. Let's get some of this mix here. Okay, and then it gets really dark. It comes down into this area. You almost can't even see the division there. I'm going to turn this. And then I have to keep in mind not to make it too dark so that I can get the little lines in there. Now, this part kind of blends in with here. So remember what I was talking about, so that you don't have those, looks like paper, like it's cut out with paper. So I'm going to come over and I'm going to grab a little bit of the blue. And let's soften that. I think one thing I need to do is I'm going to put that down, and I'm going to take my number 4, and I'm going to mix a very, very dark value again, because I'm starting to run out and it's really thinned down. Okay, now a little bit of yellow. I love that yellow does that. It's hard to believe such a light color pushes other colors out of the way. I still don't think that's enough, so a little bit more blue and a little bit more red, and again just a little bit of yellow. Okay, I've got a dark mix there, and now I'm going to take, okay, now I'm going to have to kind of leave that. Do I want to leave that alone? No, I don't. Let's go ahead and do this. All right. I'm up into that shadowy part. And I'm just kind of blending it out so it all looks like one part is fading into another. And in fact, I think it would be easier for me if I turned it this direction. So I'm going to pick up some of that dark value, and I'm going to try to go right in between everything. See how different that looks when you make sure that you don't have that cut out look. But it needs to come farther over into here. So now I'm going to put that brush down, and I'm going to get my 2-aught. I'm going to pull it back that direction. Okay, that looks really good. I'm good with that. So now I'll leave that alone. And then when I come back to it, see, like I've already lost, right there, needs to be a little bit lighter on that edge and just right along there. So that means I'm going to have to, okay, here's how I'm going to do this. I'm going to smooth that out. I'm going to get my 0. I'm going to let that sit for just a minute. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to start over in this area And I'm hoping by the time I meet up over there, I'll be able to make this nice dark area. Okay, and I'm going to start off with my darkest value. Now I'm going to add water. And then let's grab some of this violet. And I'm going to try to keep my strokes. Here's the thing I don't want to do. I don't want to get this area too dark because I'm going to be putting those dark veins in there. Drop a little bit more water, pull it downward, and then more water and across. Okay, now I'm going to just smooth it out. Okay, now I'm going to give it a few minutes. I'm going to let it sink in. And you have to watch the way you're putting the color on, because you have to look at those veins. So some of them, they go this way, that way, that way, and then they start curving and coming that direction. Turn it just a bit. Okay, the darkest parts are right under there, so I'm just pushing some color up. And of course, it all has to blend together. And let's do more of the blue violet down in this area. And all the while, keeping in mind that this area goes back to purple. So I hope you're going to hang with me, because this is going to be, it's going to be a lot of layers and a lot of values. Okay, let's even that out. Okay, now I'm going to turn it back again. Okay, so little by little. Now, see, here's the interesting thing. So look at, let me turn my image around. So look here. Before I put in that in there, I was like, ooh, that might be too dark. But now we realize this little area right here isn't dark enough. We're going to have this little lip where this petal is flipping over, and it's all part of that little area. So I'm going to, I'll get that as soon as it gets a little bit drier. So while that's kind of drying and that's kind of drying, let's come down to, let's do this little petal. So I'm going to switch back to my 2. This time I'm going to wet it. And here, and all those little dots, that's where the engraving tool is going to come in handy. Look at that perfect color right there. That's going to be really beautiful for down in that area. So I'm just going to give it a second. Okay, it's sunk in a bit, but it's still glossy, but it's losing its sheen. So what I did was I was going to try and do a warmer red over here. And the minute I pulled over a little bit of yellow, it just wanted to completely come over into my color. Okay, so this area, needs a little bit of warmth, and I'm actually going to pick up a little bit of yellow now. Drop it in there. Okay, back to the red. A little bit of water, and now I'm going to grab some of this dark value and some of the red. Just letting it kind of blend. And we kind of get a little bit of dark value there, and that's from the wrinkles. And then we start going back to dark. Drop in some red in there. And let's pick up some of the violet, and then we go back up to violet. So there's all kinds of color and value changes in this area, but I need to drop in more. More of the red. Now I'm going to go to my 0 because I'll have a little bit more control over that. I'm going to grab a little bit of yellow. And that kind of comes down and along that edge. Back to the dark. I'm just going to kind of pull it up a little bit. And let's get a little bit more of the violets right in this area. And I think just a little bit more of the red and it's kind of starting to turn an orangey, deep, unsaturated red. A little bit more of the dark value. See, I'm using my brush to push it that direction. Now I'm going to get some red. See, I'm just kind of pulling the color a little bit upward. And then I'm kind of making some little choppy veins in there. I have a really cool trick too because this, oh my gosh, this confounded me forever. How to do the veins without making them look, just flat, like you're just drawing them on plain paper. But I have a really good, fun way of getting these on there and also making them look transparent between the veins. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But all right, so colors are starting to build up. Let's go ahead and get this little dark area in here. And I'm going to use my number 2. Okay, and I'm going to wet it. Yeah, it took me like took me like 20 minutes just to figure out where in the heck everything was in this area. And that's with me having a good drawing. And it still took me a little bit. And you know what? You don't really need to see that. I feel like as long as I explain to you what I'm doing, you'll know what to do to clean up your lines. Okay, got that in. Now let's go ahead and grab some of this dark value. Let's grab some more. And now let's grab some of the red. Let's drop that in there. And actually what it really needs is lots of the blue. In fact, you know what? I'm going to pick that up a bit. There. I just had too much of the red. This little area is much bluer So because it's a blue, you know what, I should probably, let's zoom in just a little bit. Because it's more of an indigo blue, so that means I have to unsaturate it, right? So the way to do that, let me go with my 0. So I just have to be adding in a little bit of the shadow color. Okay, now I'm going to come over here. And then very carefully and slowly, I'm just going to pull that color out and make that edge that's going over to the side where it's kind of getting hit by a little bit of light. And in fact, I'm going to grab a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow. And now a little bit of shadow color again. And notice about the shadow color that it's a little bit light on that side, so the darkest areas go right through here. So I'm gonna have to I need to really build up my dark values. There's not quite enough. So I'm just going to let that sit. Now I'm grabbing a bigger brush. Okay. And I'm going to have to go change my water. Okay, now the red. Okay, now we're getting closer to a very, very dark purple. We just need a little bit more red. If you're having trouble getting a dark value, squeeze out some fresh color and use that. And then you'll get a nice, thick, dark value. Okay, so that was a lot of yellow, right? Isn't that amazing how that changes? Okay, so I'm going to go back to the blue. I'm going to try to pick up as much of this blue as possible. See how beautiful those 3 colors blend? They never look awful. They always look transparent and gorgeous. It is so hard to do this with opaque colors. See, look at that when I pull my brush through. Look at how gorgeous that is. Okay, now a little bit more red. Now let's see what happens to it. Now look, as I pull my brush through, see how it's getting more and more gray? That's so cool, it almost looks like the side of a wave. So as I pull it through, and I don't know where my piece of paper went. Oh, here it is. Okay. So look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Look, you can see little parts of the red. In fact, let's do that again. Pull some red right through it. Now watch. Okay, now I'm going to dip my brush in my water. Now look at how pretty that is. That's so much prettier than a Payne's gray or a black. Because once it starts drying, you start seeing all those everything starts kind of separating like it does on your palette. And you get all these interesting areas of grays. I'll try to hold it sideways so you can see. Okay, so now I've got plenty there. So I'm going to stop and dry and rinse my brushes. Okay, I'm going to close this lesson out. And in the next lesson, we're going to come back and we're going to keep working on the petals and building values.